Today I'm going to be working on my Santa concept, and I'm going to begin to work out the details and try to begin to render the final piece. You'll see here that it's really sketchy still, but I have the basic concept intact, and there's still a whole lot of information I need to kind of figure out in the piece for it to begin to work as a final. At this stage, I've got my concept, I've thumbnailed my ideas, I've worked out a rough sketch, and I've gathered reference. Gathering reference is another important stage, and in order to do that, what I do is I just try to gather pictures of things in my image that I might need to render realistically, like pictures of fireman axes or crows or presents. And I have those off to the side. And what I do is I use, if I'm drawing the fireman's axe, I'll go and look at pictures of fireman axes. I won't copy them exactly, but I'll go back to my image and I'll be able to know what a fireman axe looks like when I'm drawing it. Keep in mind, I don't want to get too bogged down in the reference. It's important to know how things look and realism of an object, but you don't want to get too bogged down in it because I don't want it to influence my core concept or my idea too much. I don't want to copy. I want to be creative and original, and I don't want to copy anyone else's picture. That being said, there are some parts of the image that need more information, typically the face and the hands, maybe some folds in the fabric. And for this, I'll usually photograph myself or a friend in the pose, and I'll use that information when I'm rendering. This will help me to make a more realistic painting. So what I'm doing here is I'm just cleaning up lines. I'm trying to work out little perspective details in the fabrics and things like that. I'm trying to make the image look better, and I'm just slowly going over it little by little, trying to make it look more finished. And that requires a lot of little changes, subtle changes here and there, and sometimes I might even have to redraw areas several times before I get it right. While I'm doing this, I'm looking for things like tangents. A tangent is when two lines intersect in a way that's unpleasing to the eye, and I'm looking for little things like that, little mistakes I can correct, little improvements I can make, and I'm trying to really solve as many of the problems before I start painting. I want to work out all the little things that might trip me up during the painting process as much as I can now, because once I start painting, I don't want to have to go back and fix drawing issues. So I'm gonna speed it up now, and I'll come back in and when I think there's something important to note, but just sit back, relax, and enjoy the painting and drawing process. As I start to put color in, I think it's important to note that at the early stages of coloring, I'm not really concerned about getting the exact color. At this stage, it's really the beginning, and I'm just putting in colors to see how they look. It's important to give yourself the freedom to experiment. And so I'm just experimenting with colors, and even though some of the colors might seem extremely saturated at this point, I don't want this piece to be too saturated in the final. But I do want to experiment with different levels of saturation to see how they work. And so I will put in colors and just to see how they look. I'm also going back and fixing some drawing issues that I saw. You can see here that I'm trying to really work out some issues with the Santa costume, and I don't have the right perspective of how it wraps around the leg or how it cascades off the belt down the body. So I was trying to work that out. It's still not right. You'll see in a little bit how I'll go back and fix it again. But I'm still just at this stage trying to add the early stages of color. So I'm just kind of experimenting with colors to see how they work together, to see what's right for this piece. And I will keep playing with that until I kind of find a color palette that I want to work with, or that looks good, or that works for this illustration. Having a proper color palette is important, and so I will play around with this quite a bit during the process. It's also important to note that I've already worked out my value pattern. Usually value is an important step that you work through before you get to color. What do you want your values to be? And so you have 3 areas in the piece that you need to focus on. You have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And I already established that the foreground will have the most contrast between dark and light. And the further back you go, the more into the atmospheric perspective you go. And so the objects will have less contrast and appear lighter. The reason for that is because there are little tiny particles in the atmosphere that create a haze that kind of, the further back you go into space, will begin to block out your vision. And so the objects will appear lighter and lighter because the little particles are picking up rays of light and creating this film between you and the object you're viewing. But when I deal with the foreground, I'm going to have my brightest brights and my darkest darks because there's less of that atmosphere in the way between the viewer and the objects that are closest to us. So I'm just going to keep painting. So sit back, relax, enjoy the rest of the video, and I'll come back at the end for a wrap up. Thanks for joining. As I slow down into real time, you can see the brush strokes I'm making aren't very calculated. I'm just roughing the color in at this stage. I'm just making scribbles almost of paint where I think color should go, and I'll go back and refine it as I get more and more involved in the rendering. But I don't want to bog myself down in too much detail even at this stage, because I just want to focus on getting the value and the colors correct for the piece. The little details can be put in later. The painting process is probably my favorite part of creating art. That's why when I spend so much time in the beginning working out the details, getting the drawing correct, getting my reference material, solving all the little problems ahead of time, so that I can really, when I get to the painting process, I can really start to relax and enjoy it. You can see I'm adding some more presence on the right, and that's sort of to balance the image out. I thought it was too heavy on the left, and so I added some more presence in the back on the right to kind of create more harmony and cohesion throughout the piece. And I'll continue to do that throughout the whole process. The thing I love about painting is this give and take, this pull and push that is going on between the different elements of the image. I love that give and take. I love working in a little bit in this area and a little bit in that area, and trying to find the harmony and the balance throughout the image. Well, that about wraps up the process today, so I'll continue working on this piece. It still needs a lot of work, but it's been a lot of fun. So join me next time. Thanks, and have a great day.